hello. This is page 4 of the theory textbook, the 9th edition. And here they're talking about clef signs. There's a number of them. So the treble clef sign, as I mentioned before, but unfortunately in the video the clef sign didn't show up. And also I'm doing these in one take, so when you find a mistake, enjoy yourself because there are some. Here we have again the G, A, B, C, D, F, G, G, F, E, D. The bass clef is called the F clef. So this is the G clef because it identifies the note that is G. The bass clef is called the F clef because the 2 dots go around the line that is bass F. And that's pretty self-explanatory. When you put them together with a bar and a brace, you get the grand staff. Middle C can be written close to the treble staff or close to the bass staff. This is typical of piano music, the grand staff. Let's see, that looked like it. There it goes. Okay. So then here they show you from bass C to treble C, or in our words, C3 to C5, where they are on the piano. You can add lines and spaces by using ledger lines. Back in the day, they would just write the number of lines for the staff that you needed, so it could vary a lot. Now it's become customary to have 5 lines and 4 spaces, and then just add ledger lines if you have notes that go higher or lower than the staff. You can also have other clefs, and they always tell you where C is. So this is the soprano clef, the mezzo-soprano clef, alto clef, tenor clef, baritone clef, treble clef, bass clef. And that little, where the little poop is, little indent is always middle C. So do read all this by yourself. I'm not going to read it to you. Octave identification, here's the chart that we're following. C4 through B4, then the next C is C5, and so forth and so on. 8VA above the notes means octave higher than written, and 8VA below the notes means octave lower than written. And sometimes they use 8VB to show below. This is another system of identifying octaves and pitches. You may run across it someday, so it's good to know that it exists. And then accidentals, a sharp will raise the pitch a half step, flat will lower it a half step. A natural will cancel out any previous sharp or flat. A double sharp, which looks like an S, X, raises the pitch 2 half steps. A double flat will lower it 2 half steps. Here they show you on a G. An interval is the relationship or distance between 2 tones. Our smallest interval is a half step, but some cultures have smaller intervals than that. And here's the notation of half steps using sharps: C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, and so forth and so on. We talked about enharmonic equivalence in the video with all my little toys. So go ahead and read that. Make sure you understand it. Half step motion. And what usually happens, if you have a flatted note, the note after it will usually have a different letter name, so as not to confuse you. So they wouldn't go G flat, G double flat, or D flat to, they'll go to G flat to F, and so forth and so on. Less often they would write A flat to A natural. It would be probably, I don't know, what would they say? A flat. That's not a very good example, because what are you supposed to say? G sharp to A natural, maybe, instead? And then, so that's, common practice. And then how to notate duration. Here's your brev that I spoke about, which is equal to 2 whole notes. A whole note equals 2 half notes. A half note equals 2 quarter notes. A quarter note equals 2 eighth notes. Eighth note equals 2 16th notes. Notice the beams. 16th note is 2 32nd notes. The 32nd note equals 2 64th notes, and so forth and so on. When you have to have a longer note value than you can fit into a measure, you'll use a tie, which looks like a slur, but if it's on the same line or space, then it's a tie, to connect something across a bar line. Then dotted notes, yeah, I had those cards out and I didn't use them. A half note plus a quarter note is a dotted half note. A dot always adds half the note's value to it. So half of a half note is a quarter note. So a half note plus a quarter note is the dotted half note. It gets 3 counts in our usual sort of time. If you add another dot, that's half of the first dot. So that's a half note plus a quarter note plus an eighth notes. Double dotted. Gets interesting. You can also use dots with rests. Rests are signs for silence. And at some point we'll go over those as well, because so when you have an irregular division of notes, you have to show it with a number. And here's where it gets into simple meter and compound meter. Because in simple meter, a quarter note divides into 2 eighth notes. In compound meter, a dotted quarter note subdivides into 3 eighth notes. If they happen to use 2 eighth notes instead of 3 eighths notes, they put a 2. Here's a dotted quarter note. They'll do it like that. 3-part division, they'll use the number 3, but in a dotted quarter note doesn't need the number 3 because it's supposed to divide like that. The same thing with the dotted half notes. But if you're putting 2 notes in place of 3 notes for a dotted half note, you have to use the number 2 to show that that's happening. So 4 parts, normal, normal, not normal. 3 parts is normal for a dotted quarter note or a dotted half note. So if you're going to put 4 notes in the space of time of that note value, you have to put the number 4 there to show that. 5 is weird, and that number 5 has to be there for everything. If you're going to subdivide a beat into 5 parts, no matter what kind of a beat it is, you have to use the number 5. For 2 simple notes that are in simple meter, you would have to use the number 6 to show that quarter note is subdividing into 6 16th notes. But in a dotted quarter note, it's supposed to subdivide into 6 16th notes, so you wouldn't need the number 6. But again, everyone uses the number 7. The motion of music in time is what we call rhythm. And the fundamental unit is the pulse or the beat. So you can have a rhythm and you can have a beat. Here's my beat, and here's my rhythm. So a rhythm is a variety of note values. A beat is always going to be a constant. Meter signatures tell you the pattern of strong and weak beats. And a time signature and a meter signature are the same thing. You probably learned it as time signature. So 2-2, the bottom number always tells you what kind of a note gets 1 beat. So 2-2 means a half note gets 1 beat, and there's going to be 2 half notes in the measure. 3-2 means there's 3 half notes in the measure. 4 on the bottom means a quarter note gets 1 beat. So 2-4, 3-4, 4-4. There's also a 4-2. Any number can be there. So 2 half notes, 3 half notes, 4 half notes, 2 quarter notes, 3 quarter notes, 4 quarter notes, and then 6/8 time is 6 eighth notes or 9 eighth notes or 12 eighth notes. In reality, though, you would be counting, for 6/8 you'd count 2 dotted quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 1 lolly, 2 lolly. And with 9/8, you don't really go around counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You count 1 lolly, 2 lolly, 3 lolly. The 1 lolly or the something lolly, that's your 3 eighth notes. And 12/8, 1 lolly, 2 lolly, 3 lolly, 4 lolly. Here we go, simple meter. Quarter notes divide into eighth notes, divide into 16th notes. But 3-2, yep, half notes divide into quarter notes, divide into eighth notes. I don't know what I said here, eighth notes and 16th notes. This is quarter notes and eighth notes. quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes, half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes. Everything can subdivide into two of something else. And one nice thing about Musician, the online software program that you get to have some exercises in, lots of drills for rhythm, putting in bars, filling in all sorts of things. So if there's a 2, 3, or 4 on top, it's most likely a simple meter. Compound meter would be a 6, a 9, or a 12 on top. And that's where some sort of dotted note value is the basic pulse. So in 6/8, it's a dotted quarter note, which goes 1, 2, 1 lolly, 2 lolly. In 6/4 time, it's the dotted half note. Gets 1 count, and that subdivides into 3 quarter notes. So if you're doing a piece in 6/4, it's really 2 big beats per bar, not 6. 6/8, 6/16. It's all comes, it's, as my grandmother would say, it's the same thing in green. So here, figure 1.27, 1, 2, 3, 1 lolly, 2 lolly, 3 lolly, 9/4. It's really the same thing. Maybe it's slower, maybe it's faster. 1, 2, 3, 1 lolly, 2 lolly, 3 lolly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 lolly, 2 lolly, 3 lolly, 4 lolly. And the same thing with 12/4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 lolly, 2 lolly, 3 lolly, 4 lolly. So, this may be crazy when I was a freshman. Duple simple, not triple, that's crazy. Duple simple means duple simple meters, duple compound meters. Triple simple, triple compound. Simple quadruple, I can't even do it. Simple quadruple, compound quadruple. So duple, triple, quadruple means is it 2, is it 3, is it 4 beats per bar. And then simple and compound means is it easy to count or are you going to go crazy? No, it means that each beat subdivides into 2 or each beat subdivides into 3. Then you can have asymmetrical meters, because life isn't complicated enough right now. So usually it's a 5 or a 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which you would not usually count that way. You'd look to see how the beats fall. So in a 5, say for example in a 5/4, you might count 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, or you're gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is bad, and you wouldn't want to do that, and you'd throw your ensemble off. So because we just can't handle, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it just throws the rhythm off. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that way you'd be with everybody else, hopefully. So here's a 5/8. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Oh, look at that. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Yes. Syncopation is when a long note value occurs on a part of a beat that is usually not stressed. So the fact that you have this quarter note starting on the second half of beat 1, so 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2, and that is syncopation. Or if you put an accent there. Charlie Parker, I'm sure I didn't do it as well as he does. That is also a type of syncopation. Let's see if I can do this. So by having a long note value start on the weak part of a beat, that's a type of accent, or putting an accent on a weak beat, that's a type of an accent, and that's all syncopation. Then dynamic markings have to do with amplitude, volume, intensity of sound. And we have many of those. In addition to the ones that we looked at, you have the crescendo, the decrescendo, a sforzando or sforzato, which is a sudden accent on a single note or chord. A sforzando piano means a sudden accent followed immediately by being soft. Forte piano is loud followed by soft. Now, the history of musical notation is very interesting. From about 650 to 1200, they used something called MUS. They would put in little signs to help them remember the chants. Mostly, folk music would have been just like stories would have been told verbally. It wouldn't have been written down. And also, they used a musical notation called tablature, which we don't use anymore. They weren't even necessarily using a staff. But as the church developed, of course, people wanted to write more chants, different chants. And different parts of Europe had even more chants or different chants than other places. And I think one of the popes had to kind of felt obliged to clean things up and make things more systematic, which probably got rid of a whole lot of creativity. But as part of the process of developing a set of music notation that would help them remember chants and remember music instead of having to learn it by ear or by memory, neumes were used to help you remember that those words went up or down or sideways. Eventually, they added horizontal lines, and you can, if you go into musicology, you can study this. Dr. Zimmer would have studied this. He would have learned many different types of musical notation and would be able to speak eloquently about them. But this is one development where they had neumes, and there's, in modern notation, this right here is played as this. And then, in addition to showing pitch, they also eventually developed ways of showing rhythm. So duplex, longa, longa, brevis, semibrevis are the rhythms of the day. And this, over time, developed into what we use. Here, a treatise by Franco of Cologne. We want to remember Franco of Cologne. He shows up. He shows up in music history. He'll show up on your graduate music history placement exam. Franco of Cologne, yeah. Also remember pitch notation, pitch, something, something, duration, and timbre. Intensity, pitch, intensity, duration, and timbre. This De Musica Mensurabili is a treatise or a written work about notation, and I suppose that he was just putting together what people were doing and organizing it so other people could learn it. Now, we've got rules about note heads, and your computer program will probably do this for you automatically, but when you're writing out by hand, if the note is on the middle line or above, the stem would go down on the left-hand side, and if it's below the middle line, it goes up on the right-hand side, and you want your stems to be about 1 octave long. And if you're just using a single melody line, without anything being connected, you could follow the rule for direction very well. If you have, good heavens. Okay, if you want your stems to go to the middle line, be kind of consistent if you are writing all over the place. Beams, they have rules for writing beams. You can read about that. And then you wouldn't want that. That looks very messy. You'd want it to look like this. So when you have to write by hand, you can refer to pages 16 and 17 here for the correct usage of the notes, heads, and stems. And you want the beams to line up with where the notes the stress notes are. So that's not right because it doesn't clearly show you the 3 separate beats in the bar. And this is also confusing because 9/8, they're supposed to be groups of 3. So do look at this because some of the musician software exercises are going to have to do with this. Connect no more than 6 notes by beams unless they're all part of one beat with very, very short notes. And you wouldn't necessarily combine flagged and beam notes. You'd want them all to be beamed. Irregular divisions, number of notes. Yes, I misspoke earlier when I said the whole note is a whole measure of rhythm. It's the whole rest can indicate a full measure of rest in any meter. A whole note is 4 counts, or however many counts you're counting based on the meter. In 3/4 time, you would want to use 2/4 rests instead of a half rest. So if you start using a half rest in 3/4 time, you might have trouble getting past that exercise because it's going to say that it's wrong. You want to use 2/4 notes instead of a half rest. When you have to put notes that are mixed up like this, when they're on adjacent lines and spaces, the higher of the 2 notes is going to be on the right side of the stem. So actually it goes through page 20, 16 through 20. Dots go above the line unless you're dealing with 2 different voices. And then where to put dynamic markings, how to write for instrumental music, vocal music, piano scores. So maybe just put a little tab, or just remember that this section right here is going to help you with correct musical notation. And if you find yourself getting stuck in musician, not getting the exercise right and won't let you go on, then refer to these pages because certainly the answer is in there somewhere. Let's see. Fundamentals of music notation. Oh, this is an idea for how to practice writing out by hand. And when you go to composing, I know people who say if you always compose using software, do it by hand. If you always compose at the piano, do it away from the piano. If you always compose away from the piano, compose at the piano. So try to mix things up for yourself. All right, this is probably enough for me to try to upload.